Live show number 397. I am your host, Lauren Gray, and happy St. Patrick's Day to everyone that celebrates St. Patrick's Day, which is kind of turned into a quasi universal thing. I guess well, I wouldn't say universal, not every place everywhere, but from just a general, it's a fun time to take on the celebration for something that isn't necessarily directly related to where you grew up or what your ethnicity or religion preference or anything. It's just the idea that it's a fun time to celebrate something. Although, if you ask people what St. Patrick's Day is all about, it's really just about the celebration. So, in the purest form, that's kind of the funnest part about it. To that end, welcome to our discussion day. It's going to be a little bit of I wouldn't say an axe grinding, but it's going to be a little bit of a objective looking at ways to clarify and clean up our marketing process. We've spent the past few shows talking at great lengths about the infusion of new tools, AI being one of the largest ones. Not only the content generation, but the visualization, the music, just everything of what AI is going to be impacting our life and our society. And if you haven't already been working with the AI product in your normal routine things like search engines and so forth, you begin to see a certain interest in what they can do for you. I had a plugin called Merlin for my Google search pages, and uses ChatGPT 3, which is now 4 coming out, which is even more robust. And of course, the emulations of what Bing does and so forth. And even Google now has announced in the next coming weeks that we're going to start seeing AI in Google Mail, Gmail, helping us to create or start or shortcut ourselves in the sense of what we're doing. And therein lies a little bit of the discussion point for today's topic. I feel, unfortunately, because of our hurriedness, our doing 10 pounds of stuff in a 5-pound bag, that we get sloppy. I wouldn't say complacent, but very shortcutty. We look at more about speed and so forth than it is about quality in some ways. So to that end, my topic today is about deferential decisions versus decisive solutions, and how it's the bane of multitasking marketing. I'm going to keep this in a first-person perspective for right now, and that is that it's a slow dance when we talk to a potential new client. It's about understanding what we offer, understanding what they need, trying to determine, are we comfortable with the communication level between us and them and us? Do we have a clarity to what the expectations are? Do they have an understanding of what's going to be done for them? And this is a process that takes sometimes a very long time to go from inception to putting ink on a contract and starting the work. Then what happens is a huge acceleration if we're trying to make up for all of this slow time with wanting it done yesterday or the week before. And that acceleration of trying to get a lot done, and regardless of the preparation and anticipation and so forth, there's always a reality of what's been told versus what's discovered when it comes to problems, tactics, and issues and so forth. The best example I have of that is when you go to high tech or any technology software SaaS presentation, and they talk about all the things they connect to, but in reality, they're not allowed to connect to them. So even though they say they can connect to the world doesn't really let them connect to them. And that happens a lot with the discovery process with a client. It's kind of like, from a personal perspective, relationship building. You don't tell all your ugly secrets on your first date. You want to see whether this is worth in the investment of beginning to share those things. And same too with any relationship between client and vendor, is to slowly grow through the what's behind the curtain conversations, the things that weren't first presented to you, and now you're discovering, wow, it's not just this, it's this as well, or whatever have you. And I'm going to try and speak vague to this. But in this need to accelerate, we get into a decision model that's challenging. The decision model is to get it off my plate. That prioritization of I have too much to do, and so I need to accelerate things so that I can get them off of my to-dos to get handling the more stuff that's replacing those things I'm knocking off my plate, because it's a never-ending stream of things to do. In that process, we tend to get more focused on how fast we can create a solution rather than the value of the solution itself. And so because of that, you sometimes make decisions or have the decisions get made not from a true understanding of the aspects of the problem, but rather just the parts that get to the short notes. Everybody wants clef notes. If you're not familiar with clef notes, they were cute little magical yellow books that if you didn't have the time to read the entire book, you could get the cliff notes for it and read the abbreviated synopsis of an executive overview of it. How many of you are constantly having to acid bath down a complex issue to one or two points? But it was the adage: if you can't explain it in less than 30 seconds, then you don't understand it well enough to explain it. That's not true. It's a nice euphemism, but it's a flat lie. That you can't explain complex things or large projects in a pure simplistic form. You can try. You can cut to the quick. You can do all these analogies that you want to, but the reality is sometimes, and in certain cases, it's beneficial that you don't try to surmise it, because as anybody that handles large amounts of data or anybody that handles complex variations to all that they do, it isn't a simple black and white resolution decision. You can't take a variety of variations and make it a yes no decision. It's a conditional decision. It's a variable decision. It's a gradient decision. There's lots of ways that decisions get made without this certainty of tell me the two highlights of this, tell me why this is the most important, what happens afterwards. Basically, three successions to this. What's the cost? What's the revenue opportunity for it? And as I often say in the C level, who else is doing it? But also, what's the ramifications of failure? It's a fear factor. It's an avoidance of damage. Now, however best intended, sometimes that what's the worst that can happen to it is a financial decision, but oftentimes it's political fallout. Who was attached to a decaying project? Who was attached to a bad decision? That political collateral that gets because of hooking your horse to the wrong post, kind of thing. So what happens is decisions are made intentionally fast because there's deniable culpability, as I like to refer to it. Well, I wasn't aware of all the details. What I was presented is what I made a decision on. Had I known that part that failed, I probably would not make the decision I made. I know I would make that decision I made because I would realize that would make a failure. It's bullshit. What happens is we hurry too much. And this is a regrettable circumstance in a lot of things. Sometimes the paramount decision model process is literally get it off of my plate, get it to somebody else, get it where a decision is enough that I don't have to deal with it right now, or a deference of kick the can down the road. Let me make a decision enough that I don't have to make a decision now. We see that in politics incessantly. And let somebody else get caught when music stops and they're holding the bag of poop and there's no chairs. That's what happens a lot of times in decision models. Now, how does this all relate to marketing? Well, I suffer from the inverse of what I'm talking about. I get down too many rabbit holes. I will tend to follow trails and tangents to a granular level that the value proposition of the time I'm spending on the project isn't inherently adding value to the decision of what the project is doing. I get too much into the causation effect of things, and I have to rise back up to the level of functionality because I try to understand why it works, not just the fact I need to find a way for it to work. And if you're not familiar with that idea, is that it's like when you were a kid and you had these little kits, chemistry kits or electric kits and so forth. I had friends that would like, okay, the project is to make the light bulb go on when you do all these things with the wires. They were there. Me, I'm like, well, why does this resistor, what is those little stripes on it? What does that mean? And why is this resistor used compared to one that has different stripes? And I would get too much into it and my light isn't on. Theirs is already done with the project. And I'm sitting there trying to understand what it is I'm dealing with. Beneficial at times because it gets down to a granularity that you begin to see. And I think we're basing this on bad data. But oftentimes it's a huge consumption of time that doesn't validate its use for the project's solution focus. The inverse that we're talking about today is skimming past all that and literally making decisions in deference of just, okay, so you're going to tell me this is going to be a bad thing. Right now, it's just a thing. And the thing is that I need to get it off my plate. So this is my decision. Let them have that access. Let them have that data. We'll worry about it when it becomes a problem. You're right. And then all of a sudden it becomes more of a time consumption because fundamentally, whenever a problem comes up, It's actually two problems: the current problem that you're facing because of the situation you're being right now, and the recurrence of that problem in the future. So when you're solving the problem now, you have to look at it at that you're solving the imminent problem, but what else are you doing to solve the recurrent potential of the problem happening again? That part is getting missed in a lot more ways than it should be nowadays. We're in such a rush, just get it off my plate, solve the immediate problem. Fine. They need access to such and such. Boom, give them access. Well, it's going to give them that they can control this, they can shut this off. Well, I don't care. Just send it. We'll worry about it when it happens. Okay. And then it happens. Well, why didn't we do something? Well, because this was the decision. Who made that decision? You did. I wouldn't have made that decision had I known that. You did know that. I've had literally these discussions. And these are simplistic examples. I don't want to get too overly complex with the examples of the bane of these things, but this is where that process of deferential decision making in deference. Okay, sure, slap some bubble gum on it, put a band-aid on it. We'll deal with it later. We'll replace the unit later. That repair process fixes the temporary current situation to the level possibly necessary, but it exacerbates the long solution of when this problem reoccurs again. That's the problem we're facing with. Now, in marketing, let me translate that to our world of how it affects marketing. Remember the conversation I had about the slow dance of creating a relationship that gets a vendor and client together, and then the launch goes off, and then everybody wants things yesterday. They want all of the bliss of the relationship now that they've solidified the deal to happen days before, since the inking on the paper. So what happens is a rush to product. You go in and create ad campaigns. Now, you may have done some preliminary work on it and so forth. You may have done some preparatory work on it and so forth. But now that you have the keys to the house and you get inside and you realize what is or is not working correctly, or what is really what is happening, it changes the scope of the project. You go in and you're going to make, okay, well, I'm going to make these 10 ad groups. And out of the 10 ad groups, there's going to be 10 variations, okay, per ad group. Now, there is similarities to the ad types and so forth, but they're all divergent in some keyword functionality and or headline and or description line and or linkage, and certainly, of course, of the filters associated with the ad groups. So there's a multiplicity of stuff that immediately has to get built. If you've done your preliminary research, which is fine because you weren't getting paid for that, now all of a sudden you're getting paid to do the research. And it's a matter of getting it to market. If you went over and told a client saying, okay, now that we're on board and we're doing that, it's going to be another month before we actually start producing something. Not a good conversation. Because to them, as soon as they've signed that paper, you should be hitting the ground running. So you tend to accelerate your building of campaign programs. You create variations and you start shortcutting. You're really literally trying to do 10 pounds of stuff in a 5-pound bag. You're trying to accelerate what you know should be done, but the research that to do it ultimately granularly well, you don't have the luxury of the time to do it. So you build this infrastructure of ad groups that are based on, I wouldn't say circumstantial data, but tertiary data. Data, yes. Active data, yes. Usable data, yes. But is it the full extent of the data you should be using to make these ad campaigns? No. Here's where the problem lands. You do this, and what you've created is a piece to the foundation of what you're building. You're putting the first blocking and tackling or building bricks of the building that you're creating in your marketing strategy on this data. As with any marketing is a self-fulfilling prophecy. If I target ad group types demographically or behaviorally, and I get a benefit value from it, then I realize that I should spend more or do more because there's a result into this. I did this, I get a positive result. Therefore, if I do more, I get more positive results. And it's true. But in this process of haste, we may have missed other critical opportunities that had the research been more thorough at the beginning, we would have had a better understanding of all the diversities that we would have available to us for marketing and who we should market to. But we didn't. So then, because of these results and the communication and the politics with your client, there's a repetitive rinse, wash, and repeat, expanding and exploiting what we did with the initial campaigns. Our best bet, low-hanging fruit. Ever hear the phrase? It's constantly used. And that is the default highest value opportunity of marketing with the least effective of effort necessary to get it. Low-hanging fruit, as in you're walking through an orchard and there's an apple orchard and It's easier to grab the apple that is at the bottom of the tree than it is to climb to the top of the tree to get the other apple. Even though that apple may be sweeter, this one's easier. And that's what happens. And so we get into this marketing development pattern that is low hanging fruit mentality. Easier is faster, faster is better. And that's not true. It is to satisfying short term goals, but it doesn't serve to the purpose of long term goals. And what happens is this begins to turn more and more into a self fulfilling loop. And you begin to get blinded to other opportunities of what you could market towards. If you really spent the time to look at the diversity of your options and then force rank them as to which is the best, which is the next best, and so forth and so on, you then have the ability to have that additional expansion of your marketing because you did the legwork at the beginning to know what variations you had, so that when you pretty much tapped out the low-hanging fruit, you already knew where your next step was going to go, rather than, oh crap, what do we do next? And what's worse is you now have to explain to a client there will be a dip in productivity because we have exhausted or completely used up all the low-hanging fruit options. And now the next things have to be more expensive. That's a hard conversation to have with clients. You can tell them that the initial heavier expense to get into the space will in time be rewarded. And that goes to an SEO discussion. The more you invest in content, and it does cost you now, and you don't get the immediate reward of SEO content now, the more valuable it will become in the long run as it begins to cultivate and grow and create your authenticity and your usage. It's a hard sell. Try selling any client on the fact that you're going to have to spend a lot of money with you developing content. It's a tough discussion to have with the client. They don't understand that. What they do understand is if you give them $1,000, or they give you $1,000, and you can give them 10,000 back in a 10-to-1 ad campaign, that's good. But eventually, the ad campaign doesn't do as well because it's not pointing to enough content to be valid. So, if you were to create your initial options correctly and know that you were going to have to begin to seed into these areas, like take 10, 15, 20% of your marketing budget or spend budget or production budget towards testing and utilizing other avenues of marketing, then you know the propensity for it. You're already established in that area. You know what it's going to take to cultivate that relationships. You're not starting from zero like you would be in the first example where you exhausted your the fat fruit, low-hanging fruit, and now you have to start from zero to begin to approach other market segments. Instead, you had already been seeding those other market segments, and now you're simply expanding your efforts into them so that you have less of a ramp-up time for revenue generation. It's easier to explain to a client the progressive ROI, which is their mantra, okay, as to this is going to cost more, but we've already been in this space. So we're not having to establish ourselves in this demography. We're not having to establish ourselves in this targeting. We're already in this space. We're only expanding now the fact that it has become necessary to accept the fact that instead of the glowing 10-to-1 we've been getting in low-hanging fruit, you're now in a market that's going to get you 7-to-1. It's not as sweet, but it's still good. By the way, we're already planning for the 5-to-1 market. And we're already planning for the 4-to-1 market and the 3-to-1. And wherever the bottom threshold is, we don't plan for anything below this because it's not worth it financially for us to do. Law of diminishing returns. So because of that, and the expansion of other channels, we've exhausted this particular channel, or we've optimized this particular channel. And this goes back to the block and tackle discussions we've had over the years on this show, that it's great to talk about new and shiny objects and new progressive things to do, only if you're doing the traditional block and tackle. And I give a tip of the hat to Stuart Butler, Edward St. Onge, Robert Cole, for anyone that's been on the show that refers to this, that Tim Peter, that you need to make sure you're doing the fundamentals first. So the fundamentals solve the two-problem issue, the current issue of what needs to be done and the future issue of what needs to be done so it doesn't recur. That progressive long road look is not what's being done in our decision models right now. We are faced with a lot of people that have been put into roles that have never had to deal with a zero economy. And I say this like, well, we just went through COVID, we just went through lockdown. Obviously, these people existed in times where we had no business. Yes and no. What I mean by no is If I still had a job through the lockdown, if I was kept as a high value employee, I had no goal worries. Everyone already knew I had a built-in excuse. Hey, it's COVID, it's lockdown. I wish I could do more, but there's no more to be done. It was a mea culpa. Um, and so they didn't deal with the zero economy. And what I mean by that is that very few people currently in the roles that they're in have been faced with the fact of going from being good to not being good, and how to get from not being good back to being good again. That cycle of feast and famine, you have to run the entire cycle to take credit that you're aware of what it takes to do everything in that entire cycle. When you're hand over fisting revenue, as the saying goes, revenue covers a multitude of sins. As long as the revenue stream is flowing, and it is, then errors are ignored, because who wants to focus on negative? Uh, Things that aren't going well, no problem. We'll fix it later. Right now, let's just keep shoveling in the cash. Everybody's on our doorstep. We're racking the rate. Length of stay is doing great. Demand to market's doing great. We'll run down if they don't like the condition of the room because we haven't been able to do proper repairs and so forth. We can't get FF&E in because it's too expensive. Forgo those costs. Let's just keep in that revenue margin. We'll worry about that when it gets slow or later. We'll take care of it then. And what happens is they're killing their long-term values because people are negatively impacted by their stay, that the room looks chipped, worn, and dated and tired. And so that's what they're going to remember for the high rack rate they paid. So when it comes time to a year or 2 years later, when you're beginning to solicit them, hey, you've been a great guest, we want you back, everything's going to be like, yeah, y'all are tired and worn out. You wore that place down. I have no interest in coming back into that place. You don't realize the impact on the long term that can happen. I'm looking at my notes for things. The idea of some of the negative aspects of deferential decisions versus decisive solutions, unfortunately, other than it getting it off your plate or showing a lack of understanding the entire influences of a decision, is the politics of decisions. It's wonderful that we all think that we're working for the benefit of the entity that pays our payroll. The reality is we're working for an entity that pays our payroll to benefit us. And that's not an unfair statement. It's not a bad statement. It's a reality. We work for a company for what they reward us for, which is our salaries. Our contention is how much we get compensated for what we think we're doing. Their contention is how much they have to compensate for what they think they're getting. From that dance of back and forth, you have complacency, happiness, and disparity. It's just a spectrum. Either you're begrudgingly doing something because you feel you're already doing too much for what you're getting compensated for, or they are begrudgingly paying you for what they don't think they're getting from you. But in that process, you work with other people. And in that process, everybody has a role based on the responsibility that they have as a title. Whether you're a housekeeper, whether you're an engineer, whether you're a supervisor of those departments, whether you're a leader of those departments, whether you are a leader of those people in those departments. Or at a property level, you're the GM of the property, or revenue manager, or marketer, or whatever. Or corporately, you're responsible for the operation of that property in collusion with other properties. Everybody has a status, their qualification to speak on topic. And I'll give you a contrast of both the political jockeying negatively and the political jockeying positively. I am very proud of the history I had when I was running hotels, that I had amazing teams. And this goes back many years. When The West Wing as a TV show first came out, they introduced to the TV culture what was called the walking dialogue. This progression of mobility where people that were characters in the movie or in the TV show were engaging with each other and moving physically through an office or something. And the engagements were constantly connecting to this nascent group of people that were migrating through. That was my world for several of my properties that I had great teams with, that we would be in the back of the house. That's the area that the guests don't see. And we're walking down the large back corridor behind a banquet room or a banquet hall or something like this. And we're deliberating on the day's events and the issues surrounding the day's events and the problems or logistics requirements and so forth. And we'll have banquet managers, food and beverage people, sales people, whatever, kind of in this beehive conversation. And other departments would know that this was happening. And if they had an issue that needed a question answered or a decision made or whatever, they would join the cluster of people. But not in a Oh, I'm not important. I'm a houseman. I'm going to wait until the banquet manager or the food and beverage director or the director of sales or anything finally exhausts the conversation. It was a matter of joining it. And they knew by joining it that they were now a part of the collective conversation. So if we were dealing with a particular banquet issue, there was something that was weird or wrong or some logistics that we had to deal with, all of a sudden the houseman would pipe up with an answer, or the doorman would, okay? And nobody looked at them and said, dude, whoa, back off. First off, it's not your turn. Secondly, you don't even work in this department. You don't even know what we're talking about. And you watch the front door of the hotel. What is it, you know, wait your turn or wait until we're done dealing with our issue. Nobody said that. That is not what existed in our world. What it was is it's a team member and they have an opinion. Turns out that person's an excellent mechanic or excellent this, and they have a very excellent decision process to it. And what happens is it's thrown into the conversation. Hey, well, why don't you try this? Nobody looks at it and defense like, wait, what are you talking about? It's like, okay, well, does that solve this? And we literally our idea was throw it up in the air, shoot at it. The old analogy, shoot at it. And if it still holds water after it's done, it must be a good idea. And that's what we would do. Nobody looked at ranking as a political value proposition to this process. Now, ranking does come into play with the following of guidelines. A supervisor does have to review a person that works within their team. HR has to be involved with it. There's roles that everybody has to play, but not from this perspective of collaborative engagement and teamwork. And so it was a great idea the husband came up with. And while we're at it, is like, well, okay, before, thanks, that's perfect. That's wonderful. That solves our problem. Why are you here? Oh, well, I have this problem. Oh, okay. Okay, great. Thanks. That is a positive team decision-making model that I have firsthand experience with and the pleasure of having it. It made us really believe that the impossible just simply was a solution that took a little bit more time. Now the reverse. I've been in this as well. The Shark Tank. You're in a meeting. You're at a very low level. You're at a peer group of meetings where everybody in the room has a division or department or something that's equal to and or relevant as to management level, and you go into the meeting. I've worked at companies that solicited the Shark Tank, allowed us to feed frenzy at each other. And what I mean by all this, you didn't show up at these meetings unprepared. You didn't show up at these meetings without understanding the backstory to a lot of stuff. Because a lot of times these meetings were intentionally created to throw down an idea in front of everybody at the same time with no pre-knowledge. Ownership loved doing this. Here's a crisis that you all said you did and blame everybody across the board. It's all y'all's fault that I'm dealing with this problem. Then it was up to us, the sharks, to basically destroy everybody else to show that we weren't either the one that created or we're the ones that came up with the solution. And that feeding frenzy of, well, Jane, if you ran your department like, and tear apart each other so that we were the last man standing or person standing, that our idea was the better idea. And it was intentionally done. Meetings don't exist well when you're thrown content in the meeting and asked for your contribution about it, because what you're doing is scanning. You're looking very quickly at stuff to see whatever highlight that you see as incongruous, that is worth a discussion, or damning, and you want to somehow cover that so it doesn't get shown up, but you're not doing good service to the data. You're looking at it for the objectivity of winning this conversation that you have the displeasure of sitting in. And I saw that over and over. And I made that as a learning lesson that my meetings were always pre-prepped. Here's what we're going to talk about tomorrow. And if it wasn't so well defined, at least I outlined the fact, well, this is not a strong definition meeting. This is a chance to collaborate and just think tank through some things. We're going to discuss in general this or whatever. It was not adversarial. And if somebody began to get adversarial with it, I would absolutely shoot it down saying, stop. This isn't about whether you like Jane or Lauren likes you or whatever like this. This is about solving what's in front of us right now, or addressing or talking through what's in front, whatever it is, to keep it onto a balanced ground. Unfortunately, the first is more prevalent than the latter. There are some very successful companies that do great with this team environment that is positive, and there are companies that do well because they keep everybody lean and hungry and attacking each other. It's not a negative strategy, although it's a negative environment. It keeps everybody the best at their fighting weight. Gladiatorial battles. The person that wins is the best one qualified because everybody else wasn't as good as the person that did. But with that comes the politics of that. And there's a lot of political jockeying. And when I'm bringing this all up for about decision making, is that influences decisions, not because it's the decision that's best. It's the decision that's best for the person that is allowed to make the decision. That deniable culpability conversation I had, where you could say, well, I want to be close enough to this thing that if it's successful, I can share credit for it or take credit for it, but far enough away that if it goes into a big pile of stinking poop, I can point out the fact that I had nothing to do with it. Deniable culpability. For that reason, they do enough to make that balancing act on that razor's edge. Sometimes decisions are made like, oh, yeah, I'm going to sign that because that's going to blow up Bob's project. Yeah, good deal. And that'll get him back for this, that he didn't support this or whatever. We see it in politics incessantly. It's the stagnation of our politics right now, this two-party system thing we got going on. It's an us and them. And then the polarization that we exist on, that if I don't agree with everything you have to say, then I must disagree with everything. I'm not on your team, even though there's probably lots of stuff we do agree on. That existence happens as well in business, if not more so, microcosm of it. And that is decisions are made to the benefit of the one making the decision. It isn't about necessarily what's best for the company. It's what's best for the person that is making the decision in the company. That political jockeying that goes on has lampooned brilliant ideas, has destroyed careers, has destroyed businesses. To them, they get to walk away out of the rubble, dust themselves off, and go find a job elsewhere and say that they had nothing to do with the fact that their company imploded when they were actually the fuse that lit the spark that blew up the place. That's the sad part of all of it, is that isn't a part of an interview discussion of what role people play, because you're going to listen to the storyteller, and through the storyteller, you see the storytellers, to the victor goes the history. The person that won gets to tell all about how they won. The person that lost doesn't get to talk about that because they lost. That's what happens in the politics of jockeying and so forth. There's also the idea that these decisions, in their haste, is built on, as I said, bad initial start. Like with any journey, if you take a wrong step at the beginning, no matter how far down you go down that road, it's going to take that far much to get back, to start over again, to go down the right road. And it's harder to go from the wrong road to the right road. So if you begin to base your initial efforts on poor or loose or incomplete data or incomplete decisions or politically jockeyed decisions, then it's a toxic, you're building a house on sand. It may be a beautiful house and maybe everything that you want it to be, but it's built in the wrong place and it's going to collapse because it's not on a foundation. And that foundation is your starting point. And that is the process of these decisions being made poorly, differential decisions versus decisive decisions. Decisive decisions, to talk about on the positive side, this other side of the teamwork thing I just mentioned, is to collect all the necessary information to make a quality choice, to take into account anything that is applicable of value. And this is where I said I go down a rabbit hole. Sometimes I get too granular with it, and I got to remember, let's bring this back up. Let's get what needs to be used, not just what can be used. Big difference. Make unpopular choices. And those unpopular choices may be either the admission that you were wrong, going down the wrong path, and to quickly join into on the ones that is going down the right path. The other is to agree that somebody that you do normally disagree with is actually right. Every blind pig finds a turnip kind of thing. And agree that you're wrong and they're right. That's a tough one to choke down in the politics of jockeying, but it shows character and it shows your quality. And hopefully you're working for people that acknowledge that. Soliciting expert resources that help define the best choice. When you don't know enough in your own team, to find the team that can help you with enough. That is such a hard decision because so many teams feel it's an admission of weakness. It's not. It's an actual statement of strength. We don't know what we don't know. So let's find somebody that does know what we don't know so we can add it to what we do know and make it better of a decision. That's a smart decision. Unfortunately, vendors tend to exacerbate that. One of the things I'm very proud of, what we do for Hospitality Digital Marketing, is we do unbiased auditing. We've oftentimes we've done tons of auditing. And it's always, we do it opaquely, we do it transparently, and so forth and so on. Whenever we reach out to the vendors that we're auditing their client for, like the client has asked us to audit their marketing or their whatever, and we have to deal with the vendors that are doing this for them, there is a very big suspicion like, oh, frick, what? Now we got this agency, and they'll act all nice. Like, oh, it's so good to have you. We're doing great. We'd love for you to tell them how much we're doing. Knowing full well they're like, please, don't find the stuff that we know is wrong. The idea that vendors that audit are usually doing this as a elongated sales pitch. We don't. They usually will do an audit, and amazingly, the audit shows out all the things that they do well that the current vendors don't. So the client should change the vendor that they have to them. So it's not really an audit. It's just a sales pitch to be able to exploit out the things that they're given the advantage of showing what's wrong. And amazingly, the services they say that the client needs fit exactly into the service spectrum of what they do. And actually nothing gets shown outside of what they do for them. It's like all the things that they're telling the client should be done are able to be done by them. On the contrary, for us, sometimes we're pointing out the fact that there's some things like a PR, a real PR company, not a PR where I can distribute PR anytime. That's not PR. PR is knowing the mayor, knowing the councilman. They're going to pick up a phone when you call, or the CVB chamber or something like this. That's PR. The connections and the networking that represent PR. I don't tout to be that. But I can show it to send out a news release and anything I want to all over. That's a PR release. That's broadcasting as a tangent. But the idea of being able to do an audit unbiasedly, and a lot of times we've done audits for clients, and the clients are like, "Wow, all this stuff that you're finding is like, can you fix all this?" And it's like, "Yeah, we can fix all this," but they're like, "Well, can you just start right away?" It's like, stop. If you want somebody to come in and fix all this, okay, let us finish the audit unbiasedly. Tell you everything that we can discover, okay? And then if you want to put out an SOP of vendors to solicit you to solving what it is you've defined, we'll even help you with the SOP development. And you think that we're still a worthy candidate, we'll put our hat in with the ring with the SOP, but we're not going to do it during the audit, because really then at that point, we're calling the kettle black. We're saying, oh, all these people do audits just to generate their own business, and we did exactly the same thing, and all of a sudden we have business because we're doing the audit. We don't want to do that. Finish the audit. Then if you want us to be engaged with the SOP, and there's been plenty of times that once we're done with the audit, we are very clear about the fact that they need tangent resources. That your agent, and strangely enough, they're very surprised sometimes when we point out what their vendor is doing well. They're like, wait, we thought you were going to say how bad our vendor choice was. And it's like, no, your vendor is doing this good, and your vendor is doing that good. These are things that they can work on, but this isn't, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater here. Which I always thought was a strange analogy, but I actually looked it up as to what it was. But anyways, the idea is that the audit is supposed to be valuable in an unbiased way. When it comes to decision making, allowing yourself to pick the resources that you need that may exist outside of your realm, and have a team that is strong and confident in their own successes, to know that this isn't a slight on them or them in jeopardy because they have to bring out outside resources. It's a strength in acknowledging that we don't have all the pieces to the puzzle. The whole car isn't built together. We're still missing a carburetor. We need to go get a carburetor. Great. Then the car's going to run great. All the rest of the stuff is us, but we need a carburetor. We got to go get one. Same mentality. There's resources that need to be done elsewhere. There's people that are better at certain things that you don't have the internal resources for, or your current vendor relationships don't exercise. The good vendors are the ones that acknowledge that, are willing to embrace it, are helpful to support it, and are collaborative with it. The bad vendors are defensive, they're confrontational, they're secretive, and they're biased in their opinions. And they try to leverage the politics of their relationship with the client that exists, rather than honestly looking at the best interests of the client. So those are some of the more positive aspects of making decisive decisions rather than deferential decisions. How, again, this ties to marketing is, early on, if you try to rush too much of what you do just to get it done in the thoughts that you will go back to it and recorrect it, you won't, because as soon as it's like sand when you're on the beach and you scoop it out and the water's washing in the way and it comes back again, is as soon as you get that off your plate, there's something immediately there that replaces it. So you don't get to go back. And eventually, because it's so far back, it's not worth going back to in your mind, because it would really restart all the other stuff you've done since then. So then you accept whatever truths come out of the rushed decisions or the rushed efforts, marketing campaigns and so forth, as being your baseline. And what you literally did was you took a road that was parallel to the best road, rather than get on the best road to begin with, by making the best decisions first, with the decisive decisions and solutions, by looking at all the data that you needed and making the best assessment based on rankings, force rankings, and analysis of the best people involved with it. There you go. 40 minutes of me talking to you about Deferential decisions versus decisive solutions is the bane of multitasking in marketing. And like I said, the multitasking aspect of it is because you try to do too much at the same time. And so everything suffers as to how good you do one thing. That's the multitasking is not a point of pride. It's not a badge of honor. It is a detriment of our asking a person to do too much in too little time, regardless of the resources we make available to them, because it's just simply a scale logistics of being able to get it done. I'm famous for analogies. It's like The Last Samurai, the movie. Even the best samurai who could beat anybody individually and even collectively can't go over and beat a overwhelming number of bad samurais or bad fighters. It's just the sheer numbers are too much for them to be able to handle. And that's what these problems in multitasking create is there's a good person that's capable of doing great work, but because they're being asked to do too much work in a short window of time, their ability to do any one thing well is down to doing something just to get it off their plate or just to get it out of their direction. And there is no recurrence of getting it fixed later and so forth. So with that, I sincerely appreciate your time. We will be, next week we'll still be here. Here being in the U.S. in Western Florida. But we are venturing to the world of the Netherlands and Belgium and other places here for a while through April, May, June. There's lots of fun things. Meeting clients. I'm on several boards. I'll be meeting those people. HSMI I've reached out to them if they wanted me to join any of their stuff, and they haven't. So, Ingen, if you're listening to us, since we're broadcasting on European HSMAI channel, still looking to see what we can do together. Let me know while I'm over there. But we look forward to all of your feedback as we go through discussions. The reason why I'm not saying all this is because the background will change for me as we try to pick some really picturesque places as we talk through our weekly discussions and live show. If this is the first time you're seeing us, we are in 209 countries that we broadcast in. We are on TV, Roku TV, if you're watching us there, or Google TV, or Amazon TV, or Apple TV. We have the Hospitality Channel TV station on all of those, and the live show is always on the free side. If you're watching us on one of our simulcasts, that would be Facebook on a variety of pages. As I said, HSMAI is one of several that we broadcast on, both EU and APAC and everything else. Also, YouTube, multiple channels and pages there as well. Twitter, live as well. And LinkedIn. LinkedIn only allows one broadcast, and that's mine for Lauren Gray at LinkedIn if you want to go find it. And then if you're a Twitch fan, where you use your gaming console as your media station, we're also broadcasting always on Twitch, on our channel on Twitch, Hospitality Channel on Twitch. If you want to watch us on your Apple or Android device, we are an app as well, Hospitality Channel. You can watch us there. We will be doing, as always, our audio podcast after this. It's a little bit briefer, 20 to 30 minutes, where we dive into very specific tools, the technique usage of those tools. Then we do a recap of this show and a little bit of news items and so forth. And we treat that as our podcast for this. We've been doing 9 years weekly with the live show here. We're actually going up on our 10th year. Go figure. And for that, we also, the podcast we've been doing for 17 years, but weekly for the past 9 years as well. So again, thank you. You can always give me feedback and contribute. You can send me an email at lauren@hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com. Or if you would like to do an audio feedback or for the show or comments or suggestions of comments or things, we have a really neat thing called hdm.news/talkback. And that's an audio platform that you can answer the questions we put there and tell us whether we can use what you say or give you credit for what you say, actually play if you want us to say it, and or just give us feedback as to other things you want. You can do that in just an audio fashion. It's a way of contributing to our podcast as well as our live show. Always, I Love Lucy rerun shows of this show and our podcast are complete on hospitalitychannel.tv. That one has everything indexed to the date of broadcast, the topic, and any guest hosts that we have. You can look any of those three things up. And then, there we go. Oh, Hospitality Marketing Club. If you're a hospitality professional in marketing and you need a peer group to talk to, it's not about teaching you beginners marketing. There's tons of places that do that, good or bad. But this is about you're already doing it and you need a good peer group that you can collaborate with that is not talking about what does PPC stand for, but rather how can I make multi-variant, multi-track ad channel segmentations based on target marketing of XYZ and you need somebody to talk about good, bad, preferential ways, we have live Q&A sessions. We do live webinars. We have peer group engagements. It's lots of fun. But just go to hospitalitymarketing.club, and there's just a box. So put your email in. I'll send you a quiz. If you pass 90% on the quiz, it's not a hard quiz, but it's a quiz that if you don't do the work, you're not going to know how to answer the questions. Then I'll send you an invite to join the social group. It's a closed loop group. It's not on Facebook or anything like that. It's our own platform. And like I said, it joins into where you can join Q&A sessions, live webinars, and so forth, and access to all the rich content that's on the paid channel, that's on the Apple, Amazon, Google, and Roku TV channel. So with that, my name is Lauren Gray. I thank you for the privilege of your time, and I look forward to talking to you next week.